No one expected that the night of La Revuelta, which was supposed to be just another glamorous event in Madrid, would turn into one of the most talked about moments in Yaman's entire career. Cameras flashed, fans screamed, and the red carpet sparkled under the Spanish lights, but behind that dazzling facade, something far more intense was unfolding. Yaman, usually composed and confident, surprised everyone with a confession that no one saw coming. As he stepped onto the stage during an interview segment, the atmosphere shifted. Reporters leaned forward, sensing something different in his tone. "I've made mistakes," he began, his voice steady but heavy. "And I've stayed silent for too long." The audience froze. The actor known for his charm and self-control suddenly seemed vulnerable, stripped of his public armor. Every word he said after that felt like a revelation, raw, real, and almost painful. In that moment, the buzz on social media exploded. Hashtags like #Yaman Confession and #La Revuelta trended within minutes. Fans from Turkey, Italy, and Spain filled timelines with shock, tears, and speculation. What was he referring to? Who was he talking about? And above all, why now? Then, as if to add more fuel to the fire, Kim paused, looked directly into the cameras, and said quietly, "There's someone I owe the truth to." That sentence alone sent waves across fan circles worldwide. Many immediately thought of Demet Özdemir, the actress with whom he shared not only the screen but also an undeniable chemistry that millions had felt was more than fiction. Others mentioned Sarah Bluma, his rumored companion during his time in Italy. But the person who would soon capture the spotlight wasn't either of them, it was Güldem Yaman, his mother. Within hours, the media began to chase her for comments. Would she defend him? Criticize him? Stay silent? For years, Güldem had kept a low profile, rarely speaking publicly about her son's private life. But this time, the silence didn't last long. Early the next morning, paparazzi caught her leaving her home in Istanbul. Dressed simply, with no makeup and sunglasses hiding her eyes, she looked calm but firm. A reporter called out, "Güldem Hanım, did you hear what your son said in Madrid?" She stopped for a second, turned slightly toward the cameras, and answered softly, "Yes. I heard everything." That short statement, combined with her expression, somewhere between sadness and pride, was enough to ignite another media storm. Everyone wanted to know what she really thought about her son's emotional confession. What did she mean? What had she known all along? And how much of Can's words had been shaped by the woman who raised him? The story was just beginning. The following day, news programs across Turkey, Italy, and Spain played and replayed the clip of Güldem Yaman's quiet reaction. That single line, "Yes. I heard everything," became the phrase of the week. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. The tone wasn't defensive, nor was it shocked. It sounded like the words of a mother who had long known what the world was only now discovering. For years, Güldem had stood in the background of Can's fame, watching her son transform from a young law graduate into one of the most famous actors on international television. She rarely gave interviews, and when she did, her responses were short, graceful, and protective. But those who knew her privately described her as deeply intuitive, the kind of mother who could sense her son's turmoil long before he ever spoke about it. In the wake of La Revuelta, however, something shifted. For the first time, people saw the emotional weight behind Can's confessions through her eyes. Because if Can's words on that stage were a cry from the heart, Güldem's silence was the echo that followed. She had lived through every chapter of his rise, the sleepless nights when tabloids attacked him, the endless speculation about his love life, and the constant scrutiny that followed every post, every gesture, every co-star. But La Revuelta wasn't just another gossip storm. This was personal. This was about truth, regret, and family. When she finally decided to speak, she didn't choose a glossy magazine or a morning show. Instead, she sat down with a small Turkish journalist she trusted, someone who had known Can since his early modeling days. The interview wasn't supposed to be long, but once the recorder started, her words flowed with quiet intensity. "I raised my son to fight for what he believes in," she said. But sometimes, the hardest fight is with yourself. The journalist leaned in, sensing there was more. Did you expect him to speak the way he did? Güldem looked down, then smiled faintly. Every mother feels when her child is carrying something heavy. I knew he would speak one day. I just didn't know when. It was a powerful moment, not a defense, not an explanation, but a statement of love and acceptance. And as the interview circulated online, fans began to read between the lines. Some said her calmness hinted that she had known about Can's emotional struggles for years. Others believed she was subtly referring to his unresolved past with Demet Özdemir, the relationship that had haunted fan discussions since their iconic series Erkenci Kuss. Meanwhile, social media was ablaze again. She knows everything, wrote one user. That look in her eyes said more than 1,000 words. Another fan posted a side-by-side photo of Can on stage and Güldem leaving her house, captioned, "The confession and the reaction, 2 hearts, 1 truth." And just when the buzz began to quiet down, Güldem decided to speak again, this time, not in an interview, but through a message she wrote herself. It was late evening when Güldem Yaman's message appeared online. Not through a flashy press release or a magazine statement, but as a handwritten note photographed and posted to her private Instagram story, the same account she rarely used. The photo was simple, a piece of paper resting beside a small cup of Turkish coffee, her handwriting neat and calm. The caption read only one line, "Sometimes a mother must stay silent, so her child can find his own voice." Within minutes, the image spread like wildfire. Fans translated it into every language imaginable. Italian tabloids called it La risposta silenziosa di una madre, the silent answer of a mother. Spanish entertainment shows discussed it as if it were a poem. And Turkish outlets described it as the most emotional reaction Güldem had ever given. What made that message so powerful was its honesty. There was no denial, no attempt to explain away Can's confessions, only understanding. It was as if she was telling the world, "I know who my son really is, and that's enough." Behind closed doors, people close to the family began to talk. One of Güldem's lifelong friends revealed that the note wasn't spontaneous, she had written it days earlier, after watching the La Revuelta video over and over. She didn't sleep that night, the friend said. She kept replaying the moment he said, "There's someone I owe the truth to." She knew he meant more than what he could say on stage. And what was that truth? That was the question everyone wanted answered. The confession itself had been vague, emotional, yes, but open-ended. Did it concern an old love? Regret about fame? Or something deeper, more private, between him and his family? One Turkish columnist wrote, "Maybe Can wasn't confessing to us at all. Maybe he was talking to his mother, the only person who saw both his light and his shadows." That interpretation hit fans hard. Because when people revisited the footage, they noticed it too, the pause before he said, "There's someone I owe the truth to," the flicker in his eyes, the tone that trembled for just a second. It didn't sound like a message to a lover. It sounded like a message to someone who had once warned him, loved him, and waited for him to grow up. For years, Güldem had been his quiet compass, the one who guided him when fame was new, and he was still figuring out who he wanted to be. But fame changes people, and there were times when Can drifted away, chasing success and distance at the same time. La Revuelta seemed like the moment he came full circle, back to the voice that shaped him. After the message went viral, Güldem deleted it within hours. But screenshots had already spread everywhere. The deletion only made people more curious. What had she meant exactly? Was there something she didn't want misinterpreted? Meanwhile, in Italy, Can was seen leaving a dinner in Rome, silent, his phone in hand, eyes downcast. When a fan called out, "Can, what did your mother mean?" he simply smiled sadly and said, "She always says the right thing." That line alone turned into another headline. And for millions of fans, it felt like an invisible thread between mother and son, a love story told through silences and glances, across 2 countries, across fame itself. Days passed, yet the echoes of La Revuelta refused to fade. Each new article, each fan theory, seemed to peel back another layer of emotion. But it wasn't just about what Ken had said anymore, it was about everything that hadn't been said. Between his trembling voice and his mother's quiet message, there was a story the public could only sense but never fully grasp. In Istanbul, paparazzi camped outside the Yaman family home. Every time Güldem stepped out, cameras clicked. But she never looked angry or tired, she simply moved with quiet dignity, greeting the photographers with a small nod and sometimes even offering tea to those who waited too long in the cold. It was that grace, that calm in the middle of chaos, that made people admire her even more. She had become the mirror opposite of the celebrity madness around her, no filters, no denial, just quiet strength. One evening, a well-known Turkish talk show host, Elif Karaca, dedicated her program entirely to the Yaman family. She invited journalists, psychologists, and fans to discuss what had happened. "Do you think," she asked one of the guests, "that Ken's confession was a message of guilt or gratitude toward his mother?" The psychologist replied, "Perhaps both. Sometimes confession is love in disguise. When you admit your mistakes publicly, it's not only courage, it's also a way of saying, 'Thank you for never giving up on me.'" That interpretation touched viewers deeply. Comments flooded social media. "He didn't confess because he was weak, he confessed because he finally understood." Others wrote, "Güldem raised not just a famous man, but a brave one." Meanwhile, fans began rewatching old interviews, searching for moments where Ken had mentioned his mother. In one from 2019, he'd said, "She taught me to face everything, the good and the bad." In another, years later, he'd admitted, "When I lose my way, her silence brings me back." Those clips suddenly gained millions of views overnight. In Rome, Ken was trying to continue his routine, filming, attending meetings, training, but those close to him noticed something different. He wasn't as talkative, not as fiery. It wasn't sadness exactly, but reflection. A quiet awareness. A journalist who met him at a charity event said, "He looked like a man who had finally stopped running from something." Behind the scenes, his team advised him to move on, to avoid emotional questions. But Ken didn't follow that advice. A few nights later, at a small charity gala, he was approached by a Spanish reporter who asked gently, "Do you regret what you said in Madrid?" He paused, smiled faintly, and replied, "No. You can only regret what you didn't say." That sentence instantly became the quote of the week. It appeared in headlines across Europe. And while he didn't mention his mother's name, everyone knew who he was referring to. For Güldem, those words meant everything. Friends close to her told magazines that when she heard them, she teared up for the first time since La Revuelta. "He's healing," she told one confidant. And that's all a mother ever wants. But this story wasn't just about healing, it was about reconciliation, about the fragile bond between love and pride, truth and forgiveness. And just when people thought everything had been said, Ken took one more unexpected step, one that would make the world talk again. A week after La Revuelta, while the media storm was still raging, Ken disappeared from the public eye. No red carpets, no interviews, no posts. For someone as followed and photographed as him, the silence was deafening. Fans began to wonder, where was he? Had the weight of his confession finally pushed him to retreat? Or was something else happening behind closed doors? The truth, as it later emerged, was simpler and far more human. Ken had flown to Istanbul, quietly, without notifying his team. He didn't go for an event or a commercial deal. He went home. Not to the glittering neighborhoods of Bebek or Italy where celebrities lived, but to the modest apartment where he had grown up, the same home where his mother still kept old photos of him framed on the wall. When he arrived, it was late evening. The city was quiet. The lights were on in the kitchen, she was there, preparing tea as if she somehow knew he'd come. For a moment, he just stood by the door, looking at her, the woman who had seen every version of him, from the little boy with scraped knees to the global star haunted by his own fame. And, he whispered softly. She turned, and in that instant, all the tension melted. No need for explanations, no words of defense, just a long, silent embrace that spoke of everything they hadn't said publicly. Later, they sat at the table. No cameras, no interviews, just mother and son. Between sips of tea, Ken finally said, "I didn't plan to say those things in Madrid. But when I was on that stage, I felt like you were watching me. Like your voice was somewhere in my head, telling me it was time." Güldem smiled faintly. "Maybe you finally listened." He laughed quietly, a little embarrassed. "I was scared," he admitted. "Not of them, of disappointing you." She reached across the table, resting her hand over his. "You can't disappoint me by being honest, Ken. You disappoint me only when you hide." Those words hit him deeply. Because for years, he had done exactly that. Hiding behind schedules, fame, and the walls of celebrity life. But his confession at La Revuelta had broken that wall down. As they talked late into the night, Ken told her everything, about the pressures of the industry, the loneliness, the rumors, and the emotional toll of his public relationships. He didn't mention names, but she already knew. Every mother does. When he finally said, "I don't know if I did the right thing," Güldem simply replied, "The truth is never wrong. It just takes courage to face its consequences." The next morning, they went for a quiet walk by the Bosphorus. For the first time in months, Ken wasn't recognized, or perhaps no one dared to interrupt. He looked peaceful, lighter. One witness later said, "They looked like two friends who had forgiven each other without ever saying the word forgive." By evening, he returned to Italy. But something inside him had changed. He didn't post any photos from that day, didn't talk about it in interviews, but those who met him afterward noticed the difference. His tone was softer. His words more careful. A week later, he was back in Rome for a press event. When asked if he'd seen his mother recently, he smiled and said only, "Yes. And that's all I needed." That small smile was enough to melt millions of hearts. Because for all the fame, success, and glamour, that moment reminded everyone that behind the image of Ken Yaman the star was still Ken the son. A man searching for peace, and finally finding it in the place he began. 2 weeks after Ken returned to Italy, just as the media storm seemed to calm down, Güldem Yaman made one final move that reignited everything. It wasn't a dramatic statement or a TV appearance, it was a quiet, heartfelt open letter, published through a small cultural magazine that had once interviewed her years ago. The title read simply, "A Mother's Word." In it, she wrote with rare honesty and grace, "When a child grows, a mother must learn to step back, not because she loves less, but because she must trust more. Fame doesn't change who you are, it only reveals what you hide. I have watched my son fall, rise, and fall again, and I have loved him in every version. I didn't raise him to be perfect, I raised him to be brave." And that night, when I heard his words, I knew he had finally become both. The letter wasn't long, but it was pure emotion. Within hours, it was translated into Italian, Spanish, and English. Every entertainment outlet published it. Fans cried reading it. Comment sections filled with messages like, "This is what unconditional love looks like," and "She didn't defend him, she understood him." When Ken read it, he didn't post a response. Instead, he changed his Instagram profile photo to an old black and white picture, himself as a child, sitting on his mother's lap, both smiling at the camera. No caption, no hashtags. But everyone understood. In the following weeks, interviews that once focused on rumors about love or fame shifted towards something deeper. Journalists began to ask him about family, gratitude, and the meaning of vulnerability. One Italian host asked, "Do you think you've finally made peace with yourself?" Ken smiled gently and replied, "Maybe I didn't need peace, maybe I just needed to remember who I am." That moment marked a quiet rebirth. His fans noticed the change, not only in his tone but in his presence. Gone was the restless energy of a man always chasing the next spotlight. In its place was something calmer, stronger, and real. Even his upcoming projects started to reflect that, roles that focused less on glamour and more on soul. And while people continued to debate what La Revuelta truly meant, those closest to him knew the answer was simple. It wasn't about guilt, regret, or lost love. It was about reconnection, with his roots, his truth, and the one person who had loved him long before the world even knew his name. Weeks later, when Güldem was asked whether she had spoken to her son after the letter's publication, she smiled. "We talk all the time," she said softly. "But sometimes, the best conversations are the ones that don't need words." Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes glowed with pride. And that was how the story of La Revuelta ended, not with scandal, not with tears, but with understanding. A son who dared to speak his truth, and a mother who taught the world that silence, too, can be love. When the lights of fame dimmed and the noise faded, only one thing remained, a bond that not even the world's attention could break.